Fireworks in the third and final presidential debate.
Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you have no idea.
17 intelligent. Do you doubt?
Trump claims the election is rigged. Clinton continues to face a WikiLeaks onslaught, and Utah is still in play. Tonight on the Hinckley Report. 9 women accuse Donald Trump of sexual assault. Trump urges his supporters to monitor polling sites. Clinton does damage control after a video reveals questionable strategies of Democratic operatives. All this amid a GOP civil war. A flurry of new polls show Trump, Clinton, and McMullen locked in a tight race for Utah's electoral votes. For the first time in 52 years, could Utah vote for a Democrat or even an independent? And which of Utah's voting blocks will determine the winner? Good evening, and welcome to the Hinckley Report. Covering the week, Andrew Adams, reporter with KSL, Frank Pignanelli, columnist for the Deseret News, and Ladd Egan, broadcast journalist with KSL.
Great to be here.
So glad to have you all with us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
The third and final presidential debate happened this last week, and perhaps one of the most noteworthy pieces of this was when Donald Trump was asked if he would accept the results of the election, and he said he will keep us in suspense. Andrew, are you in suspense?
Hey, certainly it's, the whole race has been suspenseful. I mean, really hasn't let you down the entire time. Interesting that he had that comment, and then the next day he kind of corrects a little bit. He says, well, I won't contest it if I win, because why would anybody contest an election that you win? And then he comes back and says, well, if there's a clear-cut choice, then I won't contest it either. So, you just have to ask, why did he raise that question in the first place? Because obviously, brought a lot of criticism from both sides of the aisle from those comments.
Frank, why did he bring that up?
I'm convinced it's a post-election strategy. It's all about what he wants. It's all about branding with Trump, and he doesn't want to be branded as a loser. He knows he's not going to win this election, so that way he can say it was stolen from me. He can establish Trump TV and operate a government in exile from a Glenn Beck studio where people pay, listen to him just gripe all day long. So that's what it is for Trump. It has nothing to do with the election. It's all about his branding and his opportunity for another TV show, probably on the internet.
So you're not buying any of this, that he really thinks he's in contention right now. This is just for what happens after.
Absolutely. He didn't even think he was going to get this far. This is all about him modifying his brand and an opportunity to make more money after the election, griping about Hillary and Congress.
Ladd, how is this being received by the electorate, particularly here in the state of Utah?
Well, there was an immediate reaction to him saying that. I mean, if you think of the highlight or what made headlines after that debate, it certainly was this exchange of him saying that he would wait and see to accept the results of the election. I was there in Las Vegas at UNLV. The journalists are in a media filing center, and international journalists from all over the world are there, and we're all watching the debate on a television. And when he said that, there was an audible reaction amongst all the journalists as well, knowing that would be something to report on from that debate, because the peaceful transition of power is the hallmark of our democracy, and him talking about, keeping us in suspense and a wait and see approach. And then Hillary Clinton's reaction was him saying that was horrifying.
Well, that is just something that you don't hear, though. I mean, you really haven't heard that from a candidate in the past. And generally in almost any race that we've ever covered, regardless of the result, everybody's essentially been civil about it. Now, it sounds like afterward he was making some remarks about being concerned about his ability to contest an election, but I don't know if anybody has ever called in a candidate's ability to contest an election.
Especially before the votes have been cast.
What's so interesting about it. So is he really going after kind of the results of this election? I'm kind of curious what the three of you think. Or is he really going after what you said, the bedrock of our democracy? Is he really casting that into
He has no clue what the bedrock of democracy is. He has no idea how the Constitution works. To him, it's all about image and branding. There's absolutely no proof of any type of voter fraud. It exists, but it's very small. We did a study in this state. It's very minute. If you look at the only people who are really defending what he's saying, it's his little cohort of circles that are obviously going to be on Trump TV when he takes this forward. This has nothing to do with his understanding of the constitutional process. It's all about branding.
Andrew, you're a student of history and politics for sure too. Has this been a problem historically?
At least not that I've been able to see over time, and it really seems like unprecedented territory. But so many things have been in this race. I mean, going back to the primary races. I mean, this has just taken such an odd track the entire time, and you're always curious what's going to be up until the election.
That is so true. Well, one of the interesting things that happened in this one was with Donald Trump saying we're going to be watching the polls, right? So what happens to that? Lad, tell me what you think is going to happen there. Is this an intimidation factor? What do you see really happening if people are thinking there could be irregularities?
I think this does play well to his base to tell his loyal followers, watch what's going on there. But, immediately after the debate, the Republican National Committee came out and walked back what Trump had said and said that they would accept the results of the election. So I'm not quite sure how Trump would have his own poll watchers with the own Republican National Committee saying that they will accept the results and that they have faith in our process. And, county clerks, state election boards across the country just saying there is no evidence of a widespread voter fraud, and so that's where Trump is maybe also lumping in the media, Saturday Night Live, with what he says is rigged, where he feels something is against him.
Very interesting. Do you have a comment?
Well, I think you have to go back to your experience just going to the polls and voting over the years. How many times do people have time out of their workday to come and observe? And, so it's good to talk. A candidate can talk and he can say, we're going to have people watching. But, I think that relies on the assumption that a large number of people out there are going to have to take time out of their day and interest to go and do that. I think, I don't know, he may have some people who end up going out to check things out. But by and large, are we going to see that? And have we ever seen that in the past? I think as a common sense question, you have to ask: are people going to go and observe in large numbers or try to be a presence?
And look who he's indicting. He's indicting a majority of the lieutenant governors or other similar officials in this country who are in charge of elections are Republicans. A majority of the local officials in charge of elections are Republicans. He's indicting the Republican Party for voter fraud. It's just bizarre.
What do you make of the fact that several people in Trump's own campaign have kind of backtracked that a little bit? Are you following that? You were there, Lad. What was the immediate response from?
Yeah, in the spin room right after, I think it was those who were trying to spin for Donald Trump to be a surrogate for the Republican Party had a very hard time balancing that, about saying, we do want to watch what's going on, but also, saying that they would accept the results of the election because, and in that room that I described of all those journalists filing reports, so many were from across the world, some from emerging democracies, and we are watched of how we handle our elections here. And so I think that was a difficult position for many to be in who were there to support Trump, of trying to figure out how to navigate that they do want it to be fair, but also this far out, 3 weeks out, already declaring that there's some sort of problem.
Very interesting. So this, for Andrew, Lad, of course, you're part of the problem, right? The media. The media is the one rigging this particular election, right? So how does that play, and why does he think he gets to say that it's the media is one of the primary reasons why this is rigged?
Well, it's a tough one, and a lot of people, I think, don't understand, what journalists do every day. And, they'll see some headlines, but, by and large, I can speak for what I do every day. And that's that I really try hard to offer a balanced report on whatever I do. I try to get both sides. I try to be factual. I try to be accurate. And I try super hard to make sure to get stories right. And I think it relies on the assumption that, that journalists always have an angle or that they always have something to say. But yeah, I just do my best to tell a fair story.
How about you?
Exactly what Andrew's saying is that, especially here, we are a state, a local media company, and that's what our job is to go out and present both sides. I think Trump's base, though, that message that the media is biased or that the media is working against him, I think it plays well. So I think he is obviously going to keep on saying that. But also, I think as media has gone with more cable news channels, that there is people can see a certain station with maybe a point of view, or that, you know, as news becomes a business for those cable news networks, that they do know what their base is, and that you can switch the channel and find that there is some sway among the cable news networks.
But the bottom line is the media's played a big role in Donald Trump. You take the amount of time that the media paid attention to all the other Republican primary candidates, it does not stack up to the amount of time paid attention to Trump. Now, Trump is indicting his own process of how he got through, but the media's played a big role because they're addicted to Trump in many ways, because he's so much fun to cover and for the audiences to watch. Even those who hate him love to watch him.
Well, what's a reporter supposed to do? All right, your lad's sitting in the spin room and he hears something about, I may not accept the results of this election. How do they not spend time on that?
You're absolutely right. Trump is essentially an alcoholic complaining about the bartender, because it's, you know, he empowered them to go out and cover him because it's saying all these strange things through Twitter and on the media, and he was so willing to go on TV. But now he's able to use it to pivot off of it to say they're part of the problem because they're giving so much coverage. Even though there's a lot of stuff in the WikiLeaks emails, it's not as fun, or it doesn't have the sizzle like all the stuff with the allegations of sexual harassment.
Well, just this week we had Andrew. We had some emails leaked, of course, the steady drip of emails from the hack, and we had some video of some Democratic operatives. All of that seems to be sort of kind of second tier compared to some of this other stuff. Why is that?
You know, it's hard to say, and there's so many things that go into, you know, what gets play in a newscast. You know, it's difficult to say from time to time. Lad, maybe you have a take on that. I feel like Clinton's issues are getting play in addition to Trump's issues. But, you know, I mean, to be fair, when there's a headline day to day, I mean, a lot of times it's driven off of something that's said. Trump's saying a lot of things. So I think naturally the coverage kind of dictates what's out there.
And I think what Frank said, the sizzle, that you know, when we look at these WikiLeaks or the FBI documents, it's a more complicated story that takes some effort from the journalist and from the viewer or the reader to digest what it means. Whereas some of the stuff that Trump says, you know, he says it quick and you already can have a reaction to it very quick. So the sizzle is what Frank said, I think has a lot to do with that. But, you know, Trump is a newcomer to politics, whereas Hillary Clinton is a known entity, and the media has followed her for decades. And so to say that Clinton hasn't been vetted or that she hasn't been scrutinized by the media, I don't think is fair. I think she has been. But I think with Trump being the newcomer, and throughout the primary process, whether people paid attention in a serious way. You know, the Huffington Post classified him as entertainment, not as politics. And so there is a little bit of the media playing catch up of trying to make sure that they're doing their job with both candidates. And I would say that Clinton, in terms of the WikiLeaks and the private email server, that stuff has been covered, but it doesn't have the same headline that some of the Trump scandals have had.
But basically what you have is the scandals are defined this way: groping genitalia, or the Latin phrase, you know, quid pro quo.
Yes.
Quid pro quo. So we got between these two, who's going to win out? The Latin phrase or the action out of that?
Oh, very interesting. Do you have a comment about that, Andrew?
Well, certainly, you know, I just think it goes back to, you know, there's obviously some very intriguing headlines there, and something that's of high interest to people. I do feel like that Clinton's storylines have gotten a fair amount of coverage. Certainly, it's been out there long before the election, but I think that Trump and some of the news that's been driving it lately, he's just happened to be the headline taker.
I was so curious because we've been talking a lot about this. We talked about the sizzle. We talked about the meat. What about Saturday Night Live? I mean, to what extent are we having a Saturday Night Live effect, Lad, framing the debates and
Trump doesn't like it. But if you watch it, Saturday Night Live is poking fun at both candidates. But when you have a week where the news is negative or Trump's had a bad week in the media, then of course he might view Saturday Night Live as being totally against him. But maybe that's just giving them more material to work with. But definitely that's where he plays into. you know, when he says rigged, sometimes I don't know if he's talking about there being voter fraud or he's talking about the media or the entertainment world working against him, and maybe something that he's not used to, having been on reality TV before. He's used to maybe having more positive media and doesn't like this type of treatment on Saturday Night Live.
Well, and in his show, The Apprentice, I mean, he's definitely calling the shots, or at least it appears on TV. He's under control. Right. He's in control, and he's calling the shots. And obviously, a different situation when you have media from essentially all sides covering an issue or a story. And you know, even if he's a reality TV star, maybe he's not entirely prepared for not having control over the situation.
I'm a firm believer that Saturday Night Live, you go back to some elections, they play a significant, it may be subtle, but a significant role of how Americans perceive their the presidential candidates, and it's happening now. You can see it. You can see it right now. That it's a little more subtle with Hillary, how they're playing her as kind of the swarmy, you know, behind the scenes controller. But it literally, you cannot tell the difference between Eric Baldwin and Donald Trump.
So let me just one more thing about TV, and it's really, we'll start with you, Lad, for just a moment. Frank brought it up. Is this all a setup for Trump TV? What are you hearing about that? Well,
we do know on the night of the election that that Trump's campaign was broadcasting through Facebook Live and had an audience there, and that when asked about it, his campaign said, well, Trump is an entrepreneur, and left it at that.
To be fair, not necessarily speaking for what Trump's intentions are, but we do know from past experience, people who have been president, people who have run for president, command huge appearance fees, make big money out of books, and certainly that market's out there for people.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let me just talk about a couple things in terms of polling. As of this morning, Hillary Clinton is up 26 points among women voters and up 50 points with Hispanics. With those two demographics right there, maybe start with you, Frank, since you've been through these political circles as well. Is it possible for Donald Trump to rebound with those two groups?
No, because first of all, he's not even trying, and secondly, their perception of him is already set in stone. Most of the states, they've already started the voting. It's over with for him with those demographics. He absolutely there's no inclination at all to make up ground with him.
I will offer a counterpoint, though, in that when the Access Hollywood video came out, interesting to note that one of the strongest emails that we got to that I saw feedback to our station, upset with the with the coverage, was it was a woman that was upset about it, and she was supportive of Trump after that. And so I think that he will get women voters to support him. You know, only time will tell what those numbers are on election day. But there are people who will staunchly support him. Doesn't matter male or female.
Very interesting. Let's go to a couple of the races and how it's impacting us locally as well. This has been so interesting to see the rise of Evan McMullin in the state of Utah. Several polls. The first one came out last week at about 20%, then 22%. We've seen a 31%, and one just this morning that had Evan McMullin at 29%. Is Utah? Let's start with you, Andrew, on this. Is Utah really in play like this?
You know, at least by the numbers, it appears it is, and it's interesting to talk to people. I had the chance to go to a Evan McMullin town hall meeting recently up in Logan, and some of the people told me that they were aware of the polling. They'd seen the numbers, and it seemed to them that he was a more interesting candidate because he was in play. And you have to wonder if it's like success breeds success, because he is showing some decent polling numbers, if more people are willing to give him a chance because they think he has a chance to carry the state.
Very interesting. Lad, this was interesting. In one of the same polls has talked about him getting above 20%. The same poll said about 48% of Utahns didn't even know him well enough to have an opinion. How is someone with 48% kind of people not knowing him doing so well?
And that could be the story there, especially when we're talking about millennials. But his campaign says, look, if he's not even well known and he's already polling this well, watch what happens when more people get to know him. So they think that is almost a good sign that that 50% still don't know who he is in the state of Utah. And, in talking with McMullin a number of times, this is exactly what his strategy is. He wants to win Utah. In order to come in third place in the Electoral College, he has to win at least one state, and Utah appears would be it for it, and that's where his target is. But his overall strategy is for neither Clinton or Trump to get the 270 Electoral College. He wants to deny both of them that, but that would mean that Trump and Clinton have to remain competitive, and that's not what we're seeing on the national polls. So, Utah is a bright spot for him, but what's going on nationally doesn't play into his strategy.
I also heard, though, I mean, he does seem to be shifting his discussion just a little bit. I heard him on a national radio program just the other morning, and he's broadening his discussion about starting a new conservative movement. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of traction that gets going forward, because it already sounds like he's at least looking past the election a little bit.
No, but the issue of 2016 in terms of Evan McMullin, and years from now we look back at it, Trump's part of the picture, but part of the picture too is the millennials. A good survey understands that a third of the electorate, almost a third, is millennials. And oftentimes, but they don't have that representative. For example, in the YouGov survey, only 17% were representative. Millennials are hard to get to on a survey because they use the phones. Millennials usually reflect or younger population usually reflect the general where they're going generally. This is different this year, especially in Utah. The millennials are driving the Evan McMullin rise because they like him, they don't like Trump, they're suspicious of Hillary, and they're driving that. Now you're seeing that attitude being reflected in other states too, because they don't know where to go. No one knows a millennial is going to show up. If they do show up, Trump's in trouble because they don't like him. So what's fascinating is that's the millennials, and you're right, over half the population doesn't know where Evan is, but it's the millennials who are going to the social media learning about him. So as the other half of the state begins to learn about Evan, how well does he do in the state then? He probably does very well. But that's the story. It's the millennials and the rise of social media. You have members of Congress or candidates for Congress running for office in this country not using 1 ounce of television. That's all social media. That's the historical significance of 2016.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was interested, Frank, when you talk about millennials, in terms of them being underreported in all of these polls. So is that better for Trump or worse for Trump?
It's better for Trump because the millennials in Utah and in other places of the country, they don't like Trump. But the issue is, you have to weigh it because you could say, well, maybe it's underrepresented in our polls, but are they going to show up? That's the question. We don't know. But it's hard to get to them too because they don't have landlines and they're suspicious of answering surveys on their cell phones.
Very interesting question to ask are these people who are voting for the first time. And, I remember how I was when, I was in high school. I was very excited for the opportunity, but you have to wonder if the national dialogue, if that's something that's going to engage them or if it's going to be a turnoff. I don't know if we know the answer to that yet.
So when Evan McMullin is trying to reach out to people in the state of Utah and around the state surrounding Utah clearly right now as well, are people voting for him because of what he is or for who he is not?
Well, everybody has their own individual choice, and I mean, we've heard everything here in this cycle from, don't like Trump, don't like Hillary. Here's another option. You raise the issue of, people don't know a lot about him, and it'll be interesting to see if they just like him as a neutral choice. I don't know.
No, go ahead.
He got traction because of the Deseret News editorial. I mean, yeah, he had some support, but the minute the concern was raised in the Deseret News, all of a sudden, we have to find a safe harbor.
And we tried to look for that when we were in Las Vegas for the debate. We looked at what the LDS population was doing there. They were very active for Romney in 2012. So we asked a few, had some interviews, and did find that Evan McMullin did not seem to have the traction there. Nevada is a true swing state, and to see how they're reacting to Trump. Arizona could be another place where Evan McMullin could be getting some support from the population, and that's what, like Frank said, it's through that social media that they're reaching out. I do think those who are interested in McMullin are interested in his foreign policy experience, being a former CIA operative, and his ethical and moral approach. So it is a protest vote against Trump, but they do like what they're finding in McMullin.
Hey, to this protest vote, if that's what it is. So how are Utahns, in your interviews and your interactions with them, how are they kind of rationalizing the idea that they may vote for maybe Evan McMullin or they may write in Mitt Romney or someone else, and by doing so, they may be really helping Hillary Clinton?
It's definitely a cost-benefit analysis, I think, for a lot of people and what they're willing to do. We heard from somebody recently. I'm sorry, I'm skipping on the name, but they were like, well, if it's close and if Trump has a chance, then that person was voting for Trump. because they felt like they wanted, Republicans in this. But they said if not, then they absolutely don't want Hillary. So then they might just write in somebody as a protest vote. And, I think you're hearing from a lot of people who haven't necessarily made up their mind, or if they did, it's that they don't want one of the two candidates. So it's like, what do they do? Do they go with a third party? Do they write somebody in? And I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now, at least from what I've heard.
And I think Trump's operatives, Trump supporters here in Utah are not liking this rise of McMullen. And even one that I talked to down at the presidential debate said, Utah's looking foolish, because if you're a Republican and you care about the future of the Supreme Court, why would you be jeopardizing, Utah's electoral votes to go to McMullen and take that away from Trump when they don't see McMullen being able to have an impact outside of Utah?
Very interesting. What happens to the Republican Party if Donald Trump does not win? And there's that segment that maybe with him about the reasons why he didn't win, if that's the case. Where do the Republicans find their strength again?
I think it's turned into kind of two different brands of such. I think so many elected Republican officials have distanced themselves from Trump that's how people are almost seeing it. That there's Trump, and then there's the Republican Party.
And I think you see these millennials who are frustrated. They're going to gravitate to a Paul Ryan or Jeff Flake type personality. And the Republicans have to make the decision that the Democrats did in the 60s, getting rid of the segregationists. They're going to have to decide, we're a party that accepts people for who they are. We were bound by these conservative principles, economics, and they're going to jettison some of the Trump people.
So are you saying the rebound is highly dependent on the person that becomes the new standard bearer? Is that what this is?
Yes.
That's what it depends on.
If it's Trump, the Republicans fracture, but it won't be Trump. It's because he's going to have his Trump TV, and he's going to be harping. It's probably going to be a Paul Ryan type figure.
And I think that's been a question that's been ongoing for some time now. Do Republicans somehow change in some way their overall focus, or do somehow you get some sort of new conservative movement? I guess time. It's a cop out to say time will tell, but only time will tell.
Frank?
I believe what's inherent into the American democracy is the two-party system. I believe Republicans are going to survive and they're going to thrive, because what you're also seeing in the election of 2016 is also a realignment. The blue-collar Democrats are shifting over to Trump. It's like an 1850s or 1930s style realignment.
Wow. Now this has been a fantastic conversation. Who can even believe the things we're talking about in this election cycle? I just know we all need to vote. That's kind of what we need to do in the end. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us on.
That's it for the Hinckley Report. For more political analysis and the news of the week, please check out our Hinckley Report Web Extra online. We'll be back next week. Thank you and good night.